It was 2 a.m. in a smoky Greenwich Village jazz club. Woody Allen had just finished his set. The laughs had come easily. They always did. The audience had loved the neurotic routine, the self-deprecating jokes about therapy and death, and his inability to function in normal society. They had applauded. He had delivered exactly what they wanted. But walking off that small stage, past the cramped tables and the lingering cigarette smoke, Woody felt emptier than he had ever felt before. And that was when he realized making people laugh was not enough anymore. The club was called the Blue Note, though it would close within a year and be replaced by something else, as all things in the village eventually were. It was the kind of place where poets and musicians and comedians shared the same bill, where the line between art forms blurred in the smoke and the late hour, where people came to feel something real, even if that feeling was just sophisticated exhaustion. Woody stood at the bar, ordering a drink he would not finish, watching the stage being reset. The comedy set was over. Now came what he had really come for, the jazz trio scheduled to play until dawn. He had performed his contracted 20 minutes. The audience had gotten their money's worth of laughs. Now he could be alone in a crowded room and listen to something that did not require him to perform. The real story had never been only about the comedy. Brooklyn, 1940s. A boy who would become Woody Allen learned early that the world was divided into those who controlled the room and those who disappeared into it. His parents argued. The neighborhood was loud. School was brutal for a skinny kid with glasses who preferred magic tricks to baseball. But he discovered something. Make them laugh, and you became invisible in a different way. You controlled the moment while revealing nothing true. By 15, he was writing jokes for newspaper columnists, getting paid actual money to turn observations into punchlines. The formula was simple. Take your anxiety, exaggerate it until it became absurd, deliver it with timing. People laughed because they recognized the fear, but appreciated that you had made it safe by making it funny. Stand-up comedy came later, in his early 20s, when the only stages available were coffee houses and tiny clubs where the audience sat so close you could smell their drinks. Woody developed a character, the intellectual coward, the man afraid of everything from death to elevator operators, analyzing his neuroses until they became performance art. It worked because it was partially true. He was anxious. He did overthink everything. But the persona was a shield, not a revelation. The real Woody stood behind the jokes, watching, protected by laughter. And for years, that protection felt like enough. The 1960s brought steady work, television appearances, better clubs, eventually real money. Woody became known in comedy circles as the smart one, the literary one, the guy who could make intellectualism funny. He headlined venues like The Bitter End and the Blue Note, places where the audience came prepared to think as well as laugh. He was good at it. That was the problem. Being good at something you did not love was a particular kind of trap. Success validated the path while simultaneously making it impossible to leave. Every laugh was proof that he should keep doing exactly what was making him miserable. But being good at something does not always mean it satisfies the part of you that needs to be understood rather than entertained. Woody had always loved jazz, not as a casual listener, but with the obsessive devotion he brought to everything that mattered. He played clarinet, badly at first, then competently, spending hours practicing scales and studying recordings. Jazz was what he listened to alone, late at night, when the comedy persona could be set aside. There was something about jazz that comedy lacked. Honesty, maybe, or risk. Jazz musicians did not hide behind formulas. They improvised, exposed themselves in real time, created something that could fail spectacularly or succeed transcendently. Every performance was different because it was real, happening in the moment, responsive to what the room needed rather than what the audience expected. Comedy, at least the way Woody practiced it, was the opposite. Every joke was tested, refined, delivered with precision. Nothing was left to chance. The audience laughed on cue because he had engineered the laugh. It was controlled, safe, effective, and increasingly, it felt like death. The contrast haunted him. On stage as a comedian, he was applauded for being clever. In jazz clubs, listening to musicians pour themselves into their instruments, he felt like a fraud. They were artists. He was an entertainer. They revealed truth. He manufactured laughs. That distinction was where the real tension lived. Tonight's set had gone particularly well. New material about his therapist, about his fear of flying, about a disastrous date with a woman who wanted to discuss Kierkegaard. Every joke landed. The audience was sophisticated enough to get the references, but not so intellectual that they resisted laughing. Perfect conditions for comedy. And yet, bowing to applause, Woody felt nothing. Or worse than nothing, a creeping awareness that he was wasting his life being good at something that did not matter. That all the laughs in the world could not fill the space where artistic purpose should live. He had ordered bourbon but was not drinking it, just holding the glass, watching condensation form, waiting for the jazz trio to begin. The club was half empty now. The comedy crowd had mostly left, replaced by the real late-night people, the musicians, the insomniacs, the artists who worked while others slept. The lights dimmed further. 3 men took the stage: bass, drums, saxophone. No introduction, no preamble. They just began playing, and the room transformed. The bassist started with a walking line, establishing the rhythm. The drummer joined, brushes on snare creating texture rather than beat. Then the saxophone came in, and Woody felt something shift in his chest. The melody was familiar, Autumn Leaves. But what they were doing with it was entirely their own, taking the standard and finding new spaces inside it, new emotions the original composer had not intended but the song could hold. This was what Woody wanted. Not comedy. This. The ability to take something familiar and make it revelatory, to expose yourself through your art without hiding behind cleverness, to create something that mattered whether or not anyone applauded. The saxophone player was maybe 40, black, completely absorbed in his instrument. He played with his eyes closed, not performing for the room, but exploring the music itself. When he improvised, it was not showing off. It was searching, finding notes that expressed something language could not. Woody watched, transfixed. This man was doing what Woody had never allowed himself to do: be completely honest in public. No jokes to deflect, no punchlines to release tension. Just pure expression, vulnerable and undefended. The set continued. 40 minutes of improvisation that felt like 5. The trio played My Funny Valentine, Round Midnight, Stella by Starlight, standards that had been played 10,000 times by 10,000 musicians. But tonight they sounded new, because these 3 men were finding their own truth inside the familiar structures. When they finished the set and left the stage without acknowledging applause, Woody remained at the bar, shaken. He had just witnessed something that made his comedy feel like an elaborate lie. Not because the jokes were false, they came from real anxiety, but because the form itself was designed to protect rather than reveal. Jazz musicians stood naked. Comedians wore armor made of laughter. Woody ordered another drink. This one he would finish. The saxophone player came to the bar, ordered water. Woody recognized the moment as significant even as it was happening. He could stay silent, let it pass, return to his comedy career and the safety it provided, or he could speak. And speaking would require admitting something he had not articulated even to himself. "That was incredible," Woody said, the words feeling inadequate. The musician nodded, not dismissive but not particularly interested either. "Thanks, man." "How do you do it?" Woody asked. "Just expose yourself like that. No safety net." The musician looked at him more carefully now, seeing past the thick glasses to something genuine underneath. "You're the comedian, right? I caught some of your set earlier." "Yeah," Woody admitted. "You were funny. Smart stuff." "But it's not—" Woody trailed off, unsure how to finish. "It's not jazz," the musician completed, understanding immediately. "Comedy's about control. Jazz is about letting go. Different languages." "I want to speak your language," Woody said, and heard how desperate it sounded. The musician considered him. "Then you gotta be willing to fail. Really fail. Not fail and recover with a joke fail. Actually bomb, completely, with nothing to catch you." "I don't know if I can do that," Woody admitted. "Then you can't do jazz," the musician said, not unkindly. "But maybe you can do something else, something that's yours. Just gotta figure out what that is." He took his water and returned to the other musicians. The conversation was over, but it had cracked something open in Woody that would not close again. The club would close in another hour. Woody stayed until the end, nursing his drink, watching the trio play 2 more sets. Each song was different from the last time they had played it. Each improvisation revealed something new. They were not trying to be perfect. They were trying to be true. And that was what Woody wanted. A medium where truth mattered more than effectiveness, where failure was possible, but so was transcendence, where he could expose himself without the safety net of laughter. Film, he thought suddenly. Film could do that. He had been writing screenplays, selling jokes to television, but always as an extension of comedy. Always with the assumption that his value was in making people laugh. But film could be jazz. Could take familiar forms, love stories, character studies, observations about life, and find new truth inside them through personal improvisation. The thought terrified him and excited him in equal measure. Walking home through pre-dawn Manhattan, past shuttered storefronts and the last struggling drunks, Woody felt the decision crystallizing. He would not quit comedy immediately. He needed the money, and walking away from success required more courage than he currently possessed. But he would start making films. Real films. Films that mattered to him whether or not anyone else understood them. Films that could fail. The risk was enormous. He had no training as a director, no connections in the film industry beyond selling jokes to television. He would be starting over, abandoning a career that worked to pursue something he might be terrible at. But the alternative, spending the rest of his life being a successful comedian who felt empty, was no longer acceptable. The jazz musicians had shown him what artistic honesty looked like, and he could not unsee it. That night became the dividing line. Before the Blue Note, Woody Allen was a comedian with vague artistic ambitions. After the Blue Note, he was an artist who happened to work in comedy while building towards something else. The transition took years. His first film, What's New, Pussycat, was a mess, taught him that he could not trust others with his vision. Take the Money and Run was his first real attempt at directing, crude but personal. Bananas refined the approach. Each film was an improvisation, trying to find the jazz sensibility in cinema. The comedy remained, but it began serving something deeper. Instead of jokes that protected him, Woody started writing humor that revealed him. The neurotic persona became less performance and more confession. The laughs came from recognition rather than cleverness. Annie Hall was the breakthrough, the moment when he successfully translated jazz's honesty into film. A love story that admitted love does not fix anything.
Characters who were complicated and real, rather than types designed to be funny.
Structure that felt improvised even though every frame was carefully constructed. Critics called it his masterpiece. Woody called it the first film where he stopped hiding. But the real transformation had happened that night at the Blue Note, watching three musicians expose themselves without fear. They had shown him what was possible if you were willing to risk everything familiar in pursuit of something true. Years later, Woody would still play clarinet in jazz clubs, never professionally, just for the love of the form and what it represented. He would tell interviewers that jazz taught him more about filmmaking than film school ever could. The improvisation, the honesty, the willingness to fail in pursuit of something that mattered. The lesson was hard-won and simple. You could succeed at something and still be failing yourself. You could make people laugh and still be lying.
True art required risk, vulnerability, the possibility of complete failure. It required abandoning what worked in pursuit of what mattered. That 2 a.m. conversation with a saxophone player lasted maybe 2 minutes, but it contained the entire second half of Woody Allen's artistic life. The decision to stop protecting himself with laughter and start exposing himself through cinema. The choice to value truth over effectiveness, honesty over applause. Making people laugh for 20 minutes was easy. Woody had proven that night after night. Making something that mattered, something that revealed who you actually were beneath the jokes, that was terrifying. That required the kind of courage he had seen in jazz musicians who played without a net, knowing they might fail but choosing to try anyway. Walking off that comedy stage for what would not be the last time, but would never feel the same again, Woody Allen had felt emptier than ever before. But by dawn, walking home through quiet streets after watching musicians bare their souls through their instruments, he felt something else. Possibility. The possibility that he could be more than clever, more than successful, more than safe. That he could make art that exposed him as completely as a saxophone solo exposed its player. That he could find his own language, his own jazz, his own way of being honest in a medium that allowed for both truth and beauty. It would take years to fully realize that possibility. Dozens of films exploring different approaches, different tones, different ways of being vulnerable on screen. Some would succeed critically. Some would fail commercially. All would be attempts to capture the honesty he had heard that night in the Blue Note. The jazz musicians probably never thought about that conversation again. For them, it was just another late-night talk with another searching artist. But for Woody, it was the moment everything changed. The moment he stopped being satisfied with making people laugh and started pursuing something harder, making them feel. That was the real confession that night. Not spoken aloud, but admitted to himself in the silence between sets. That he wanted more than success. He wanted meaning. He wanted to create something that mattered even if it failed. He wanted to speak a different language than the one that had made him successful. He wanted to make jazz, but on film. And sometimes the bravest thing an artist can do is admit that what they are good at is not enough.
that success is meaningless if it does not satisfy the need to create something true. That starting over, risking everything, choosing possible failure over guaranteed safety, that is where real art begins. Woody Allen made people laugh that night at the Blue Note. Then he watched jazz musicians make something better than laughter: beauty, honesty, truth. And he decided, standing at a bar at 2 a.m. in a club that would soon cease to exist, that he wanted to do that too. The decision would define everything that came after, not because it was easy or successful or applauded, but because it was real. And real, he had learned from jazz, was the only thing that ultimately mattered.